South Africa hosting the three-day African Growth and Opportunity Act Summit in Newzroom, that's here in Johannesburg. AGOA provides duty-free access to the United States market for most agricultural and manufactured products exported by eligible African countries. How important, though, is AGOA to the African continent and particularly here in South Africa? Someone who knows a little bit more than we do is Professor Adrian Saville, who is from the Economics, Finance and Strategy Division at GIBS. Prof, good morning to you and thank you very much for your time. Let's start with AGOA. Why is it significant for us here in South Africa? Can we start there?
Sure. I think that's a great place to start. If you think about the spirit of AGOA, it's to provide opportunity, as hinted by the acronym, to facilitate economic growth and in particular growth through industrial trade with one of the biggest markets, or the biggest market in the world. And by being afforded preferential access, the idea is that that will help facilitate industrialization, economic growth, advances in competitiveness of participating African economies. So that's the spirit of the agreement.
Yeah.
And what sits behind that spirit then is the imperative to turn the idea into action. That's where things start to become interesting.
What?
If we start to look for the evidence of the success of the agreement.
Let me latch on to exactly what you've just said, that it's about now turning the idea into action. Has South Africa made full use of AGOA for the time that we have been party to this agreement?
I wouldn't. No. It must be read against the backdrop that historically the West is, or the global North, is South Africa's most important economic partner. So leave aside all of the political nuances and subtext. If we just bring an economic lens to the conversation, historically the global North has been South Africa's most important investment partner, technology partner, and trade partner. And that's the spirit behind AGOA, that South Africa would continue to benefit and grow through that relationship. Now, what's happened by way of actual participation, and if we look for evidence that of industries that have emerged or trade volume that has precipitated as a result of the agreement, this really is at the margin. So read at face value, the agreement has had at best marginal impact, but that should not take away from the spirit and ethos of the agreement.
Trade volumes have been marginal. That is the point you are making. Who's at fault,
Absolutely.
Professor? Who is at fault? Is it South Africa failing to leverage, or is it because there is not much to leverage from?
I suppose this is like any good relationship debate or argument. Probably a little bit of both. And we now need to figure out, who is, who carries the balance or the bulk of responsibility. If we step back from AGOA and we just take South Africa's participation in world trade volumes over the last 40 years or so, South Africa has been in a state of steady decline. So there's nothing recent about South Africa's falling competitiveness. And the point that I think we should emphasize here is that notwithstanding the preferential access that South Africa and other African markets have been afforded, South Africa's participation in world markets and in the North American market has been steadily falling over the last 30 or 40 years, and it's a result of South Africa's sagging competitiveness.
Sure. And then, of course, Professor, we can't ignore what I would call the temperatures that have been bubbling under in the lead up to this summit, and I'm using those words advisedly because South Africa and the United States started being at each other's throats on the back of that Lady R matter relating to the Russia-Ukraine war or conflict. And then there is now the Middle East conflict. Would we be reading too much in between the lines to suggest that perhaps part of what is going to happen here is to test just how solid these relations are at the current moment?
Yeah, you've you've put it very carefully. Everyone knows what we're talking about, and it's the tension between, I've made reference to the global north, sitting in the global south. You could call this, the BRICS or the expanded BRICS, this increasingly important politically, economically, geographically allegiance. And historically that was made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, representing a substantial population, a growing share of the world economy, and that share continues to grow. And if we just take the population, the head count of India and China, we're talking about 3 billion people. So there is no way that you can pragmatically look past the importance of these relationships, whether it is from a political lens, a military lens, a geographic lens, a demographic lens, a trade lens. This is a large, powerful and growing arrangement or alignment. What's tricky about it is that there is this disconnect or disparity, tension between the global north and the global south. How do you reconcile that? How do you navigate it? And here I think that we could actually look to one of the BRICS members for guidance and lessons. There are other good examples that we can find from history, and perhaps we can talk about those in a moment. Yeah. But of the countries that make up the initial members of BRICS, I think that India has been particularly astute in navigating the resident tension. And a strategy most often is about making choices, that you have to choose A versus B. There's a lovely saying from Sekiro Honda, the founder of Honda Motor Corporation, and thinking about strategy, where he says, why does the choice have to be A or B? Why can it not be A and B? And India, I think, is showing the way on how to be ambidextrous in terms of partnering with the West with its historical might and gravity, and at the same time being aligned with a rising and emerging East or North and South, depending on your preference for the terminology.
Prof, I'm sad because we have to end the conversation, but let me end it with this final question, and that is the 4 countries, if I have it correctly in my memory, who are now facing the prospect. In fact, a notice has already been put out that their relationship with AGOA is being terminated, and these are countries found on our continent. And the reason that is being used by the United States, as it stated, it is that these countries have not been in step with the rules that govern internationally recognized human rights. Basically, they're being blamed for human rights violations. Is the United States a fine one to speak on this matter when we are observing what is going on in the Middle East? They are pumping weapons to Israel against a people who have no military might. Am I wrong?
Yeah, so you're pulling me onto very thin ice. This is not my area of expertise. So, I prefer to, if I am going to comment with extreme caution and lots of caveats, that this isn't an area of my expertise, but whether or if you're going to bring an economic lens, you have to weigh into consideration political elements. And your point is well made that, who is the United States to call out these countries where they may be, guilty of the same different equivalent violations. It's not an area where, I think I have the expertise or the skill to navigate.
Yeah.
I hear your point, and, it's well made. And, I think that that's a deliberation that has to be made in our individual minds, because this is a consideration that is well beyond a 1-minute response or a 10-minute conversation on economic impacts. So you'll forgive me for not venturing onto that thin ice.
Prof, I understand. I completely understand. It is a tenuous position to have put you in the first place. But let me thank you very much for your insights here. Professor Adrian Saville is attached to GIBS, the Institute for Science and Business.